My name is Martha. I'm 62 years old, and until recently, I believed family meant everything. After my husband James died, I don't nobody. I lived quietly in Connecticut, while my son Timothy and his wife Amelia built their perfect life. I never flaunted my wealth, preferring simplicity over showing off. But that fateful night, when my own flesh and blood sent me crashing through glass, everything changed. Sometimes silence is your greatest weapon. Before I tell you how my own son pushed me through glass, please hit like and subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how karma came for those who thought I was worthless. I worked as a financial advisor for almost 4 decades at Richardson and Gray, one of the most prestigious firms in Boston. I built my career on honesty, careful planning, and genuinely caring about my clients' financial well-being. It wasn't just a job to me. I took pride in helping families secure their futures, especially women who had never been taught to manage money. James and I met during my second year at the firm. He was an architect with a gentle soul and brilliant mind who came in for financial advice after receiving an unexpected inheritance. What started as professional meetings over portfolio diversification quickly blossomed into coffee dates and dinner conversations that had nothing to do with money. Within a year, we were married in a simple ceremony by the Massachusetts coastline, surrounded by close friends and family. Our son Timothy arrived 2 years later. From the moment I held him in my arms, I knew I would do anything to give him a good life. James and I weren't wealthy back then, but we were comfortable. We saved diligently, lived below our means, and focused on building meaningful experiences rather than accumulating possessions. Timothy was a bright, curious child with his father's creativity and my analytical mind. I can still picture him at 7 years old, building elaborate structures with his blocks, then calculating how much it would cost if it were a real building. James and I would exchange proud glances over his head, silently acknowledging the beautiful blend of our personalities we saw in our son. As a family, we took modest vacations, usually road trips to national parks or historical sites, where Timothy could learn while we created memories. We didn't spoil him with expensive toys or designer clothes, but he never seemed to mind. He understood the value of money from an early age because we taught him through example. When Timothy decided to pursue business administration in college, I couldn't have been prouder. He graduated with honors and landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm. Like many young professionals, he struggled initially with the transition from academic success to corporate reality. I watched him navigate office politics and client expectations, offering guidance when asked but giving him space to find his own way. Then Amelia entered the picture. They met at a corporate fundraiser where Timothy's firm and her public relations company were both sponsors. She was beautiful, ambitious, and charming. When Timothy first introduced us over dinner, I was genuinely happy for him. She complimented my earrings, asked thoughtful questions about my career, and seemed to truly appreciate my son. The engagement came quickly, just 8 months after they started dating. James and I hosted a small celebration dinner at our home. It was the first time I noticed something slightly off about Amelia. When Timothy proudly showed her the vintage watch James had given him as a graduation gift, intending to wear it for the wedding, she wrinkled her nose and said, "That old thing. We'll need to get you something more appropriate, babe. Something that makes a statement." The comment stung, but I dismissed it as wedding excitement. The watch had been James's father's, a family heirloom with sentimental value beyond its modest monetary worth. I saw a flash of hurt cross Timothy's face before he quickly agreed with Amelia. It was subtle, but in retrospect it was the first crack in what would become a pattern. Their wedding was lavish compared to the modest ceremony James and I had chosen. Amelia's parents contributed, but Timothy and I covered most of the expenses. I noticed I was seated at a table far from the main wedding party, while Amelia's college friends occupied prominent positions. Again, I brushed aside my discomfort focusing instead on Timothy's happiness. After the honeymoon, I began noticing changes in my son. Our weekly Sunday brunches became monthly, then sporadic. When we did meet, Timothy seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone for messages from Amelia. He began making comments about my outdated condo or my sensible car that suggested these were somehow shortcomings rather than conscious choices. James passed away from pancreatic cancer 5 years ago. It was swift and devastating. Timothy was supportive during the funeral and the immediate aftermath, but within months, his visits became rare. Amelia often had excuses for why they couldn't attend family gatherings or why they had to leave early when they did show up. I was losing my son inch by inch, and I didn't know how to stop it. I tried maintaining our relationship through regular calls, thoughtful gifts for special occasions, and genuine interest in their lives. But increasingly, I felt like an outsider looking in on my own family. The son who once shared everything with me now gave brief, surface-level answers to my questions. The distance grew not in miles, but in emotional connection, and it broke my heart daily. Despite their good salaries, Timothy and Amelia seemed perpetually short on money. Timothy was now a marketing director, and Amelia had moved to a prestigious PR firm, yet financial stability eluded them. I began noticing the signs, the nervous way Timothy checked the bill. At restaurants, the tense discussions about vacation plans, the vague references to temporary cash flow issues. Their lifestyle told a different story than their bank accounts. They purchased a sprawling colonial in an exclusive neighborhood with a mortgage I suspected stretched their budget to breaking point. Amelia drove a luxury SUV that cost more than most people's annual salary, and their social media showcased expensive restaurants, designer clothes, and lavish parties. One Sunday, after noticing Timothy's worried expression, when the check arrived at lunch, I gently broached the subject. Timothy, you know, I was a financial advisor for decades. If you and Amelia are feeling stretched, I'd be happy to look over your budget and offer some suggestions. His face flushed immediately. We're fine, Mom, just waiting for my year-end bonus. I understand, but sometimes an outside perspective helps. No judgment, just, I said we're fine, he snapped, then softened slightly at my hurt expression. Sorry, it's just been stressful at work, but we've got it under control. That evening, Amelia called. I initially felt hopeful she was reaching out to connect, but her tone quickly dispelled that notion. I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't undermine our financial decisions, Martha, she said coldly. Timothy doesn't need his mommy telling him how to manage money. We're adults with a plan. Amelia, I wasn't trying to interfere. We know what we're doing. Your generation is too conservative with money. Sometimes you have to spend to earn respect in our circles. I bit back the financial advisor in me that wanted to explain how dangerous that mindset was. Instead, I apologized for overstepping, though I hadn't. The pattern continued at Thanksgiving dinner at their house. I complimented a beautiful crystal vase, and Amelia casually mentioned it cost more than my monthly pension. Later, when I offered to help with dishes, she whispered to her sister, loud enough for me to hear, "Poor Martha, still using the same dishwasher from the 90s while we've got the latest smart appliances." Her comments stung not because I cared about material possessions, but because of the dismissive attitude toward my choices and values. What Amelia didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that my modest lifestyle was a choice, not a necessity. When Christmas came, Timothy called with an unusual request. "Mom, I hate to ask, but we're in a bit of a bind. Could we borrow $5,000 just until February when my bonus comes in?" It was the first direct ask, but I sensed it wouldn't be the last. I transferred the money immediately, wanting to help my son. February came and went, with no mention of repayment. In March, another request came for $7,000 to cover an unexpected tax issue. Again, I helped without hesitation, though I noticed the pattern forming. At Timothy's birthday party in their backyard, I overheard a conversation that chilled me. I had stepped around the corner to answer a call from my doctor when Amelia's voice carried clearly. Timothy's mom has no idea how to enjoy life. All those years as a financial advisor, and she lives like she's one step from a retirement home. It's sad, really. A friend's voice responded. At least she helps out financially, right? Amelia laughed, a harsh sound I'd never heard from her. The small amounts she can spare hardly make a difference. But Timothy says it's easier to take her money than listen to her outdated advice. We just nod and smile, then do things our way. I stood frozen, phone forgotten in my hand. My son, my Timothy, was allowing his wife to mock me while taking my money. Worse, he apparently shared her sentiment. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. That night, I made a decision. I would continue to love my son, but I needed boundaries. The next time Timothy called asking for $12,000 for home repairs, I gently declined. I'm sorry, Timothy, but I need to be more careful with my retirement savings. I can offer you $2,000, but that's my limit right now. The coldness in his response was immediate. Don't worry about it then, Mom. We'll figure it out ourselves. For weeks afterward, my calls went unanswered. When Timothy finally picked up, he was distant and brief. Invitations to dinner were declined with vague excuses. I was being punished for setting a boundary, and the realization broke my heart all over again. What Timothy and Amelia didn't know was that my financial situation was vastly different from what they assumed. My modest condo, practical car, and simple lifestyle weren't signs of limited means but conscious choices. 15 years ago, my uncle William passed away unexpectedly. He had no children of his own and had always been fond of me. To everyone's surprise, he left his entire estate to me: property, holdings, investments, and significant cash assets. Additionally, some investment decisions I'd made early in my career had paid off exponentially over the decades. Combined with James's life insurance and our careful saving, my net worth was just over $31 million. Only my lawyer, Harold Winters, and my financial advisor, Patricia Chen, knew the full extent of my wealth. I had decided long ago not to disclose this information to Timothy while he was finding his way in the world. James and I wanted him to develop his own work ethic and sense of financial responsibility, rather than counting on an inheritance. After James died, I considered telling Timothy about the money. But as I observed his changing attitudes and Amelia's materialistic influence, I hesitated. I feared what sudden access to wealth might do to him when he was already struggling with financial responsibility. I decided to wait until he showed more maturity in his financial decisions, or until he truly needed the support for something important, like his own children's education. Meanwhile, Timothy and Amelia's financial problems grew worse. Credit card statements accidentally delivered to my address. Timothy had used my address as a secondary contact, showed balances nearing their limits. Once, when Timothy left his phone unattended during a rare visit, a notification flashed, showing an overdraft alert from their bank. Their assumptions about my finances became increasingly insulting. At a family dinner with my brother and his wife, Amelia casually remarked, "It must be tough living on just a pension and Social Security these days, isn't it, Martha?" My brother, who knew about my inheritance but respected my privacy, nearly choked on his wine. The couple's financial demands grew alongside their disdain. What started as borrowing a few $1,000s escalated to expectations of tens of thousands for vague investment opportunities or business ventures that never seemed to materialize into actual returns. During one particularly tense phone call, Timothy suggested I take out a reverse mortgage on my condo to help the family, meaning him and Amelia. When I gently explained why that wasn't a good financial decision, he exploded. "You've always been too conservative with money, Mom. This is why you're still living in that tiny condo while everyone else enjoys life. Don't you want to help your only son succeed?" The emotional manipulation was becoming unbearable. I was not only expected to fund their lifestyle, but also to accept their narrative that I was financially limited and therefore somehow less valuable. As their demands increased, so did my concern for their financial well-being. Through carefully casual conversations, I learned They had taken a second mortgage on their house just 18 months after buying it. Amelia had 3 personal credit cards maxed out, and they had financed their furniture, cars, and even vacations. After one particularly distressing interaction, where Timothy implied I was selfish for not helping more, I scheduled a meeting with Harold Winters. We updated my will and trust arrangements, creating contingency plans I hoped I'd never need to use. Harold, who had known me for decades, expressed concern about the relationship dynamic he was observing. Martha, as your friend, as well as your lawyer, I'm worried about the pressure they're putting on you. Financial exploitation of parents isn't uncommon, unfortunately. I brushed aside his concerns, still believing that beneath it all, Timothy was the loving son I had raised. I couldn't imagine he would ever truly harm me despite the emotional distance and financial demands. I was wrong. The invitation came unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon. Timothy called, sounding more like his old self than he had in years. Mom, Amelia and I would love to have you over for dinner this Friday. It's been too long since we've had a proper family meal. Hope fluttered in my chest. I'd love that, Timothy. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, he said warmly. Amelia's making her special lasagna. I spent Thursday baking Timothy's favorite lemon pound cake, despite him saying not to bring anything. Old habits die hard, and baking for my son had always been an expression of love. I dressed carefully on Friday evening, choosing a blue blouse James had always loved, and simple pearl earrings that had been my mother's. Timothy and Amelia's house was immaculate as always when I arrived, though I noticed a few subtle signs of financial strain. A designer lamp missing from the entryway spaces on the walls where artwork had been removed. Amelia greeted me with unusual warmth, taking the cake with compliments that seemed almost genuine. That looks delicious, Martha. You really didn't need to go to the trouble. Timothy hugged me longer than usual, and for a moment I felt like I had my son back. The dinner was pleasant, with conversation flowing more easily than it had in years. They asked about my garden, my book club, my volunteer work at the local literacy center. I began to relax, thinking perhaps this was a genuine attempt to reconnect. As Amelia served the cake I'd brought for dessert, the conversation subtly shifted. So, Mom, Timothy began, his voice taking on a tone I recognized from his childhood when he wanted something expensive. We've been doing some thinking about the future. Oh, I took a small bite of cake, suddenly wary. Yes, we've come across an incredible investment opportunity. It's in real estate development, very exclusive. The returns are projected at 30% within 18 months. I nodded, waiting for him to continue, though alarm bells were already ringing in my mind. No legitimate investment guaranteed those kinds of returns with certainty. The thing is, Amelia interjected, her voice honey sweet, the buy-in is substantial, $250,000. I nearly choked on my cake. That's quite an investment. It's actually on the low end for this development group, Timothy added quickly. They normally don't accept anything less than $500,000. But my college roommate, Brad, is one of the partners, so he got us special consideration. I see. I set down my fork carefully. And you're telling me this because we thought you might want to get in on it too, Amelia said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. For your retirement security, Timothy leaned forward. Actually, Mom, we were hoping you might help us with the buy-in. We'd put your name on the investment too, of course. You'd get your share of the returns. The true purpose of the dinner became crystal clear. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about accessing my perceived limited funds. That's very thoughtful, I said carefully. But $250,000 is far beyond what I could manage, even for an investment. Timothy's face fell. We thought you might be willing to take out a line of credit on your condo. The returns would more than cover the payments. I don't think that would be wise at my age, I replied. But I could consider contributing maybe $15,000 if you could show me the prospectus, and I could have my old colleague look it over. Amelia's warmth vanished instantly. $15,000. That's practically useless for this opportunity. It's what I'm comfortable with. I said firmly, and I would need to see documentation before committing anything. Godmother. Timothy exploded, all pretense gone. Why are you always so stingy? Do you know how embarrassing it is that my friends' parents help them with down payments and business ventures, while my mother pinches pennies in her little condo? The sudden shift shocked me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. I've helped you many times, Timothy, I said quietly, but I have to be careful with my retirement savings. Retirement savings, Amelia scoffed. You worked in finance for 40 years, and that tiny nest egg is all you have to show for it. Maybe you weren't as good at your job as you thought. The insult stung, but I maintained my composure. I've made choices that work for me. Choices that leave you with nothing to show for your life. Timothy snapped, standing abruptly. While you could be helping your only son build something meaningful, I stood as well, recognizing this dinner had been a terrible mistake. I think I should go now. Of course, Amelia said, her voice dripping with disdain. Run away rather than actually supporting your family. I've supported Timothy his entire life, I responded, gathering my purse. But I won't be manipulated into financial decisions that don't make sense. Timothy blocked my path to the door, his face contorted with an anger I'd never seen directed at me before. You have no idea what pressure we're under, he hissed. The second mortgage, the credit card debt, all because we're trying to build something, while you sit on whatever pittance you've saved. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said sincerely. But taking on more debt isn't the solution. If you'd let me help you create a budget. A budget? Amelia laughed harshly. We don't need budgeting advice from someone who's been driving the same car for 15 years. Please move aside, Timothy, I said firmly. This conversation isn't productive. Productive? His voice rose dangerously. Nothing about you is productive. Just a useless old woman who can't even help her own son when he needs it. I tried to step around him, but he moved closer, his finger jabbing toward my face. I backed up, feeling the sliding glass patio door behind me. Timothy, you need to calm down, I said, my heart racing. I'd never seen him like this. Calm down, when my own mother would rather see me fail than help, when she probably has money sitting in accounts doing nothing while we're drowning in debt. Amelia stepped beside him, her face twisted in disgust. She doesn't care about us, Timothy. She never has. It's always been about control with her. That's not true, I protested, feeling the cool glass at my back. I love you, Timothy. I always have. If you loved me, he shouted, stepping even closer, you wouldn't be so selfish. I'm leaving now, I said, with all the firmness I could muster, trying again to move past them. What happened next seems surreal even now. Timothy grabbed my shoulders, his face red with rage. Amelia stood behind him, her eyes gleaming with a terrible satisfaction. You're not going anywhere until you listen, Timothy growled, giving me a shake. Take your hands off me, I demanded, my voice steady, despite my fear. Do something useful for once in your life, he shouted, and then he shoved me hard. The glass door shattered on impact. I felt a moment of weightlessness before landing amid razor-sharp shards on their patio. The pain was immediate and intense as glass cut into my back, arms and legs. Warm blood soaked through my blouse, the one James had loved. Timothy and Amelia stood frozen in the doorframe, momentarily shocked by what had happened. Then, unbelievably, Amelia spoke. Now look what you've done, she said, not to Timothy, but to me, as if I had deliberately fallen through their door. That's going to be expensive to replace. I lay there, glass embedded in my skin, blood pooling beneath me, and my son made no move to help me. He stared, his anger momentarily suspended by shock. But there was no rush to my side, no horrified apology, no immediate call for medical help. With a dignity I didn't know I possessed, I carefully pushed myself up, wincing as glass cut deeper into my palms. Blood ran down my face from a cut near my temple, dripping onto the patio stones. I'll call a taxi, I said quietly, pulling my cell phone from my pocket. Thankfully, it had survived the impact. Mom, Timothy finally spoke, but stopped, apparently unable to find words. You didn't mean to. I finished for him, though I wasn't sure that was true. I understand. You should be more careful, Amelia said, already beginning to construct a narrative where this was somehow my fault. You backed into the door too hard. I didn't argue. I didn't scream or accuse or break down, though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I stood among the shattered glass of their door and my shattered illusions about my son, and I remained silent. That silence, that moment of not giving them the reaction they expected, was the first step toward reclaiming my power. As I waited for the taxi, blood soaking through my clothing, I made a decision. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, and some truths can no longer remain hidden. My silence in that moment wasn't weakness, it was strategic. They had no idea what was coming. The taxi driver's eyes widened in horror when he saw me waiting at the curb, bleeding from multiple cuts, glass fragments still visible in some wounds. Ma'am, you need an ambulance, not a taxi, he said, immediately dialing 911. No, I said, firmly placing my hand over his phone. Please, just take me to Hartford Hospital emergency room. I'll be fine. He looked uncertain, but reluctantly agreed. As we drove, he kept glancing in the rearview mirror, clearly concerned about my condition. What happened to you, if you don't mind me asking? I fell through a glass door. I replied simply, offering no further explanation. The less said, now the better. The emergency room staff reacted with professional urgency when I arrived. Triage nurses immediately took me back, doctors were called, and the painful process of removing glass fragments and stitching lacerations began. I had 17 cuts requiring stitches, dozens of smaller cuts treated with butterfly bandages, and a minor concussion from where my head had hit the patio stone. Ma'am, these injuries are consistent with being pushed through glass, the emergency physician said carefully as she stitched a particularly deep cut on my forearm. Is there someone hurting you at home? I met her concerned gaze steadily. My son pushed me through a glass patio door during an argument over money. Her hands paused momentarily. I'm required to report this to the police. I understand. I nodded. I'll speak with them. A police officer arrived while I was still being treated. Officer Daniels was a kind-faced woman in her 40s who sat beside my hospital bed with a notepad. Mrs. Bennett, can you tell me what happened tonight? I recounted the evening's events with clinical detachment, as if I were describing something that had happened to someone else. Officer Daniels took detailed notes, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Ma'am, these are serious injuries resulting from an assault. We strongly recommend pressing charges against your son. I considered this carefully. Not yet, Officer Daniels. I need some time to think. Ma'am, family violence often escalates. Your son could be dangerous. I understand your concern, I said. But I need 24 hours to make certain arrangements before any formal charges are filed. Can you hold the report until then? She looked reluctant, but nodded. I'll put the report on hold until tomorrow evening, but then we'll need to move forward one way or another. After she left, a nurse brought me a hospital gown to replace my blood-soaked clothing, which had been cut away during treatment. Lying in the sterile hospital bed, I finally allowed myself to process the emotional impact of what had happened. My son, the baby I had nursed, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the young man I had helped through college, had violently pushed me through glass and then stood by as I bled. The betrayal was so profound, it felt physical, like another wound alongside the cuts being treated by the medical team. I remembered Timothy at 5 years old, climbing into my lap after a nightmare, seeking comfort and safety. I remembered his high school graduation, the pride in his eyes when he spotted James and me in the audience. I thought of the hundreds of small sacrifices James and I had made over the years to give him opportunities, the love we had poured into raising him. How had we come to this moment? When had money and status become more important to him than basic human decency toward his own mother? As midnight approached, I asked a nurse for permission to make a private call. Alone in my hospital room, I dialed Harold Winter's home number. Martha. His voice was thick with sleep. It's after midnight. Is everything all right? No, Harold, it's not. I replied, my voice breaking for the first time. I need you to activate contingency plan B tonight. Harold was immediately alert. Martha, that plan is only for extreme circumstances. What happened? I told him everything. By the end of my account, his voice had changed from concerned to coldly professional. I'll make the calls now. Patricia will be notified and we'll begin the process immediately. The financial aspects can be implemented before morning. Thank you, Harold. Martha, he paused. Are you physically safe right now? I'm in Hartford Hospital. They're keeping me overnight for observation due to a concussion. Good. Stay there until I contact you tomorrow. Don't return to your condo yet. And Martha? Yes. I'm so sorry this happened to you. No one deserves this, especially not from their child. After hanging up, I closed my eyes, exhausted but oddly calm. The decision had been made. There was no going back now, only forward into whatever new reality awaited me. The next morning, doctors examined me again, checking my stitches and concussion symptoms before reluctantly discharging me with strict instructions for rest and follow-up care. A hospital social worker provided resources for elder abuse victims, which felt surreal to accept. I had never imagined being in this category. As I was preparing to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Timothy. Mom, about last night. Things got out of hand, but you were being difficult. The door was old anyway, probably defective glass. Let's just move past this. No need to make a big deal out of an accident. No apology. No acknowledgement of harm caused, just deflection and minimization. I stared at the message, feeling a strange sense of clarity washing over me. The single text confirmed everything I needed to know about where we stood. I replied with a simple, I'm recovering, we'll talk soon. Let him interpret that however he wished. The wheels were already in motion. A taxi took me home, where I carefully photographed my injuries for evidence before changing into clean clothes. My back and arms screamed in pain with every movement. The mirror reflected a woman I hardly recognized, face pale, a stitched gash near my temple, bruising starting to bloom across visible skin, eyes hollow with a grief beyond tears. I picked up my phone and made one more call. Patricia. It's Martha Bennett. Harold has probably contacted you already, but I wanted to confirm personally. Yes, implement everything we discussed. Every single measure. No exceptions. The elite legal team assembled in Harold Winter's office the following morning had the polished predatory look of people who charged $800 an hour and were worth every penny. I sat at the head of the conference table, my injuries visible and stark under the office lighting. Mrs. Bennett, we've initiated all the financial protocols as instructed, said Elaine Coburn, the financial forensics specialist. All assets connected to Timothy and Amelia Bennett have been frozen pending investigation of potential financial fraud. This includes their primary checking and savings accounts, investment portfolios, and property transactions. The evidence of credit card fraud is particularly concerning, added Robert Mercer, the criminal attorney. They opened 3 credit accounts using your identity and personal information. That's a federal offense. And the second mortgage? I asked quietly. Patricia Chen, my financial advisor, shuffled through documents. Taken out 8 months ago for $400,000. Based on their spending patterns, almost all of it is gone. They're underwater on the property by a significant margin. The private investigator's preliminary report is also available, Harold said, sliding a folder toward me. I should warn you, Martha, it's not pleasant reading. I opened it to find surveillance photos of Amelia, with not one but 2 different men, neither of them my son, entering hotels on different dates. Additional pages detailed Timothy and Amelia's spending luxury vacations, jewelry, expensive restaurants, clothing from high-end retailers. All while they claimed financial hardship and asked me for money. We've also compiled records of every loan they've requested from you over the past 3 years. Harold continued. The total exceeds $120,000, none of which was ever repaid, I noted. Exactly. Now regarding your safety and the assault charges. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Timothy. I showed the screen to Harold. Should I answer? Yes, but keep it brief. Don't mention any of our actions yet. I put the phone on speaker. Hello, Timothy. Mom, what the hell is going on? His voice was panicked. Our accounts are frozen. The credit cards aren't working. The mortgage payment is due tomorrow. I kept my voice calm. I'm still recovering from my injuries, Timothy. Injuries. It was just some cuts from an accident. But this is our life we're talking about. We can't access any of our money. I suggest you speak with your bank. I need to rest now. I ended the call as he was still shouting. The phone immediately rang again. This time it was Amelia. Martha, whatever you've done, you need to fix it right now. We have dinner reservations tonight with Timothy's boss, and my card was just declined while I was getting my hair done. This is humiliating. Amelia, I was pushed through a glass door last night and have 17 stitches. I'm hanging up now. The calls and texts continued all day as the couple realized the extent of their financial paralysis. I didn't respond again, instead focusing on the legal strategy session. By late afternoon, reports came in that Timothy and Amelia had shown up at my condo, pounding on the door and shouting. Thankfully, I had followed Harold's advice and checked into the Madison Hotel under Patricia's name. The security team Harold had hired reported the couple's increasingly desperate behavior, including Amelia screaming accusations at neighbors who came to investigate the disturbance. That evening, Harold contacted me to confirm that everything was in place for the meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. the following day. Timothy and Amelia had been served official notices to appear at the law offices of Winters, Coburn and Associates regarding urgent financial matters requiring immediate attention. I slept poorly that night despite the luxurious hotel suite. My injuries throbbed and my heart ached with the finality of what I was about to do. This wasn't just about money. It was about severing the last threads of a relationship that had once been the center of my world. The mother in me still whispered, doubt still looked for ways to justify and forgive. But the woman who had been pushed through glass and left bleeding on a patio knew there could be no going back. Morning came with a strange sense of calm. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit that covered most of my injuries, though the stitches near my temple remained visible. Harold had arranged for a private car to bring me to the office through a secure entrance, avoiding any potential confrontation with Timothy and Amelia in the lobby. From a small monitoring room, I watched on a screen as they were escorted into the conference room. Timothy looked disheveled. His normally perfect hair, uncombed stubble on his usually clean-shaven face. Amelia's designer outfit couldn't hide her agitation as she paced the room snapping at Timothy when he suggested they sit down. At precisely 10 a.m., Harold entered with two other attorneys. I waited as planned for the strategic moment. "Where is my mother?" I heard Timothy demand. "What has she done?" "Mrs. Bennet will join us shortly," Harold replied coolly. "First, we have some preliminary matters to discuss. Like why our accounts are frozen. This is harassment. My mother is acting out of spite because of a stupid accident. Mr. Bennet, we have evidence of multiple federal crimes committed by you and your wife, including identity theft, credit card fraud, and elder financial abuse. The accident you refer to has been documented as a physical assault resulting in serious bodily harm." Amelia's voice rose shrilly. "That's absurd. Martha fell through the door herself. And what fraud? We've done nothing wrong." Harold calmly opened a folder. "We have documented evidence of 3 credit accounts opened using Martha Bennett's social security number and personal information without her knowledge or consent. We have evidence of a pattern of financial exploitation through coerced loans that were never repaid. And we have photographs and medical reports detailing the injuries Mrs. Bennet sustained when she was pushed through a glass door during a dispute about money. The room fell silent. Then Timothy spoke, his voice smaller. "Where is my mother? I want to speak with her directly." That was my cue. I entered the conference room, my head held high despite the pain that still radiated from my injuries. Timothy and Amelia turned, their expressions shifting from anger to shock as they took in the visible evidence of the assault. "Hello, Timothy. Amelia." My voice was steady as I took my seat across from them. "Mom," Timothy began, "this is all a misunderstanding. You know I would never intentionally hurt you. Yet here I am with 17 stitches, a concussion, and glass fragments the doctors couldn't safely remove, still embedded under my skin." "It was an accident," Amelia insisted. "And now you're trying to ruin us financially out of revenge." I looked directly at her. "No, Amelia, I'm protecting myself from further harm, both physical and financial." Harold placed another folder on the table. "Mrs. Bennet has authorized me to disclose certain financial information that until now has been private." He slid the folder toward Timothy, who opened it with visible confusion. "What is this?" he asked, looking at the documents. "That is a summary of your mother's actual financial position. Martha Bennett's current net worth is $31,400,000. The silence in the room was absolute. Timothy's face drained of color as he stared at the numbers. Amelia grabbed the papers from his hands, her eyes widening as she scanned the contents. That's impossible," Timothy finally stammered. "If you had this kind of money, why would you live so modestly? Why would you refuse to help us?" "I did help you, Timothy. Over $100,000 in loans that you never intended to repay. But I chose not to fund an unsustainable lifestyle built on appearance rather than substance. But your condo, your old car, were choices, not necessities. I value experiences and security over status symbols." Amelia found her voice. "So all this time, you've been hoarding millions while watching us struggle. What kind of mother does that?" "The kind who raised her son to earn his own way," I replied evenly. "The kind who was pushed through glass and left bleeding when she wouldn't hand over $250,000 for a fraudulent investment opportunity." Harold cleared his throat. "We are prepared to offer terms for resolving this situation without criminal charges being filed." He outlined the conditions. All fraudulent accounts would be paid off and closed. All loans would be considered resolved with no further obligation. In exchange, Timothy and Amelia would sign legally binding agreements never to contact me again directly or through third parties. "You're cutting me off completely." Timothy looked stunned. "Your only son." "My only son pushed me through a glass door, Timothy. He stood by while I bled and then texted to tell me it was my fault for being difficult. At some point, maternal love must yield to self-preservation." "This is insane," Amelia sputtered. "You can't just erase your son from your life." "I'm not erasing anyone. I'm establishing consequences for actions that could have killed me." Harold presented the documents for signature. Timothy stared at them, then at me. "Mom, please, we can work this out. I was stressed about money, not thinking clearly. You know I love you." For a moment, my resolve wavered. This was my child, despite everything. But then I noticed Amelia's hand on his arm, her whispered words I couldn't quite hear, and the calculating look that briefly crossed her face as she glanced at the financial summary again. "Love doesn't push someone through glass, Timothy," I said quietly. "Love doesn't manipulate and exploit. What you feel might be familiarity or obligation, but it isn't love." So that's it. 38 years as mother and son ended just like that. No, not just like that. Ended by a series of choices you made culminating in violence. I didn't end our relationship, Timothy. You did the moment you put your hands on me in anger. Amelia grabbed the pen suddenly. "Fine, I'll sign your papers. But know this, Martha, you're going to die alone and miserable." I watched as she scrawled her signature across multiple documents, then shoved them toward Timothy. He hesitated, longer tears finally forming in his eyes. Mom, sang the papers, Timothy. I said, my voice gentle but firm. Then go home and really think about the person you've become and the influence you've allowed in your life. As he slowly signed each page, I stood to leave, having said all I needed to say. Mrs. Bennet, Harold said, do you have any final statements for the record? I paused at the door and turned to look at my son one last time. The saddest part, Timothy, is that if you had simply asked for help with genuine need rather than endless want, if you had treated me with basic respect, I would have gladly shared everything I have with you. What I couldn't abide was being valued only for what I could give rather than who I am. With those words, I walked out, closing the door on that chapter of my life and stepping into an uncertain but ultimately liberating future. The physical healing took months. Glass cuts are particularly nasty, prone to infection, and slow to mend. Some mornings I would wake up to find blood on my pillowcase from a deeper fragment working its way out of my skin. The doctor said this could continue for up to a year. The emotional wounds took even longer to address. I began seeing Dr. Lambert, a therapist specializing in family trauma, twice weekly. During our first session, I couldn't speak about what had happened without breaking down. By our 10th, I could discuss it with a painful but necessary detachment. Martha, Dr. Lambert said, during one particularly difficult session, have you considered that Timothy's actions reflect his failings, not yours as a mother? Intellectually, yes, I admitted, but there's always that voice wondering where I went wrong, what I could have done differently. That's natural. But from everything you've described, you and James provided a loving, stable home with healthy values. Adults make their own choices, even when those choices hurt the people who raised them. Gradually, I began rebuilding my life. I sold my condo, which held too many memories, and purchased a small but beautiful Cape Cod-style house near the coast. The sound of waves became my nightly lullaby, washing away the echoes of shattering glass that still haunted my dreams. I found purpose in unexpected places, through a support group for victims of family violence. I met Eleanor, a retired teacher whose daughter had financially exploited her until she was nearly homeless. Her story resonated deeply, and we became close friends, supporting each other through difficult anniversaries and moments of doubt. Eleanor introduced me to volunteer work at a women's shelter, where my financial background proved unexpectedly valuable. Many women fleeing abuse had never managed their own money, having been financially controlled by their partners. I began offering weekly financial literacy workshops, teaching basic budgeting, credit management, and saving strategies. 6 months after the incident, I established the New Beginnings Foundation, dedicating $5 million to providing financial education and emergency assistance to older adults experiencing family financial abuse. The foundation also funded legal aid for those who couldn't afford representation against exploitative family members. The work became healing in itself. Each person I helped strengthened my own recovery. Each story shared made me feel less alone in my experience. The foundation quickly gained attention for addressing an often overlooked form of elder abuse, and I found myself speaking at conferences and to policymakers about financial exploitation within families. 1 year after that terrible night, I received an unexpected letter. The return address was unfamiliar, but the handwriting was Timothy's. I sat with the unopened envelope for days, unsure whether to read it or return it unopened. Finally, curiosity won over caution. "Dear Mom," it began, "I don't expect you to respond to this letter or to forgive me. What I did was unforgivable. I'm writing not to ask for anything, but to tell you that Amelia and I are divorced. After you left that day at the lawyer's office, everything fell apart between us. Without the pursuit of money binding us together, we discovered there wasn't much else there. I've been in therapy for the past 8 months, trying to understand how I became someone who could hurt his own mother. I've had to face hard truths about myself, my values, and the person I allowed myself to become under Amelia's influence. This isn't about blaming her, the choices were mine, but about recognizing how I lost my way. I saw an article about your foundation in the Boston Globe. The work you're doing is important and meaningful. You always did find ways to help others, even after experiencing the worst in people. That was true when I was growing up, and it's true now. I don't expect to be part of your life again. I understand why you needed to protect yourself from me, and I respect that decision. I just wanted you to know that I am deeply, profoundly sorry for the pain I caused you both physically and emotionally. You deserved so much better from your son. With love and regret, Timothy. I read the letter 3 times, emotions washing over me in waves. There was pain in revisiting that night, but also a quiet recognition of the growth his words suggested. I didn't respond immediately, needing time to process my feelings. After 2 weeks of reflection, I sent a brief note to the return address. Timothy, thank you for your letter. I'm glad you're getting help and finding your way forward. I'm not ready for direct contact, but I appreciate knowing you're working on yourself. Take care, Mom. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement. A small crack in the wall that had needed to be built between us. Life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. The foundation is thriving, helping hundreds of seniors reclaim their financial independence and dignity. My circle of friends has expanded, bringing rich relationships I never would have developed had I remained in my previous life. I travel more now, checking destinations off the list James and I had made for our retirement, taking him with me in spirit. The scars remain both physical and emotional. Some mornings I trace the largest one along my forearm, remembering how quickly everything changed that night. But scars also represent healing wounds that were once open but have now closed, leaving us marked but stronger. If you're watching this and facing difficult choices about family relationships that have become harmful, please know there is life beyond the pain of setting boundaries. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and ultimately for them, is to step away until genuine change occurs. Silence in the face of abuse isn't weakness. It can be strategic strength, giving you space to plan your next steps towards safety and healing. I stayed silent that night as blood ran down my face, not out of fear or shame, but because I recognized a turning point that required careful handling rather than emotional reaction. That silence protected me while I activated the resources needed to secure my future. What would you do if someone you loved became someone who hurt you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more stories of transformation through difficulty. Remember that your worth is never determined by how others treat you, and it's never too late to reclaim your power and rebuild your life. Thank you for listening, and may you find strength if you're facing similar challenges.